Epictetus once famously said that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Listening is a very difficult skill to master, but it has so many benefits. I, for one, had a lot of trouble with listening at the beginning because I love to talk a lot. But what I realized to master the art of public speaking is you need to master listening. Because if you're spending most of that time listening instead of opening your mouth, you're going to realize very quickly what the needs of your audience are. And through those needs, you'll be able to craft a presentation that they'll fall in love with. That's exactly why in this week's episode of MasterTalk, I'm going to be covering my 3 practical tips on how you can listen better and speak less. Hi everyone, I hope you're having a fantastic week. Brendan from MasterTalk here, your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And on this week's episode of MasterTalk, we're covering my 3 practical tips so that the next time you give a silence, it's to listen more and not to speak. So let's get into it. Number 1, put yourself in a position where you couldn't reply even if you wanted to. The beauty of podcasts and recorded conversations is no matter how much you try and butt into the conversation, you just can't because it's a conversation that's happened in the past. That's why when practicing your listening, especially when you're extrovert like me and you just love to talk, you need to put yourself in a situation or a conversation where even if you wanted to say something, you just can't for the sake that the conversation happened a long time ago. That's why even if I still spend most of my time talking on a day-to-day basis, giving workshops or talking to people or giving advice, I always reserve an hour to 2 hours every day to listen to somebody else. That way, through podcasts, I'm taking notes, I'm summarizing those notes, I'm making sure I get all of the information I want from those podcasts, but it also helps me practice listening to somebody else without trying to create my own ideas. The difficulty here is when you try and replicate this in real life. So for example, if you try and practice this in real life situations, let's say 2 people are talking, you're trying to kind of eavesdrop into their conversation, you almost want to reply because they're right there. Even if you won't, that thought that you have in your head, hey, maybe I could say this, maybe I could say this, maybe this will help them, that will prevent you from listening, and you still won't say it to them, right? But that thought will come to your mind. But when you're in a podcast situation, you just can't at all, right? So put yourself in a position where you can't reply even if you wanted to. And because of this, my listening skills improved sharply over the years, over a consistent period of time. Because I've been doing this for a couple of years now, so now I'm a lot better of a listener than I used to be. And I can use my silences, not just for public speaking, but also speaking less so I can listen more and master my audience. Number 2. Grab coffees with people you find interesting and ask them questions you've always wanted an answer to but was too afraid to ask. There's a lot of bizarre questions that I love to ask people when I meet them the first time. Not only does it help my listening skills, but it also improves my knowledge base. More like podcasts, for example. I listen, but I also get a lot in return. And there's 3 key questions that I like to ask people when I meet them the first time that I think will be beneficial to you. And of course, if you enjoy these questions, be sure to let me know in the comments below, and I can share the rest of my question bank with my audience and with you guys, because I have over 30 questions that I've built or I've either gotten from other sources or people have given me over the years that I've been doing this. So let's get into these questions. Number 1, the dinner guest question. If you were to have dinner with anyone that has lived or is currently living on Earth, who would you have dinner with? But more specifically, what would you ask that person that they can't read about in a book or watch in a video? You'll get some very interesting answers from that question. There's always this perception that we have of people when we meet them the first time. Oh, these people are innocent, or these people are, rich, or they have a lot of money, or things like that, or they care about specific issues, like animal rights or things like that. But when we actually talk to them, we realize that they have this deep passion for something that we never could have guessed unless we specifically asked them the question. So that's why this question is interesting. Number 2, this is called the passion question. So the question goes like this. If you have all the money in the world, how would you be spending your time? I don't really care personally how you're spending the money, right? Unless you do, feel free to ask that to them. But in my case, it's like, okay, you're going to talk about all the material stuff that you're going to buy. A new car, a new house, a new bungalow, things like that, just material things. But what would you do with your time? I mean, you don't need to work anymore, right? Would you wake up at 8 a.m.? Would you wake up at 5 a.m.? Would you go jogging? Would you wake up at 1 p.m.? It's interesting to kind of get answers in that regard. The third one is I call the problem solving question, is if you had all the money in the world to solve one problem, what problem would you solve? I'm someone who's very philanthropic and I love to give back and help the world in general. That's partially why I created MasterTalk to begin with. But it also helps me to understand what problems other people are solving for right now, so that I can help people who are very passionate about solving problems in a way that I know best. You know, through resources, maybe through my public speaking videos so they can raise more money for the charities they care about, things like that. So by asking these three questions that I'm just itching for an answer, it's way easier for me to listen in to what they're saying and improve my listening skills, but also my general knowledge, right, that I know. So now we talked about the coffee game. We talked a lot about being in a position where you're not allowed to reply. Now let's talk about number 3, which is the name game. I know so many people tell me this. Oh, Brendan, I'm that person. I'm that guy or gal who just, I meet you for the first time and I just can't remember your name. And I always laugh at these comments because I always tell them, like, if somebody, like, really attractive comes up to you, woman or man, and introduces themselves and says their name, what is the likelihood that you're going to remember their name? Pretty high, right? It's not that people have bad memories, it's that people just don't care. And I was definitely one of those people at the beginning. Not really that I didn't care, but rather, like, I always made the excuse that it was so difficult for me to remember names. And a way for me to mitigate this, and a way I recommend for you guys to do it as well, is to play the name game. So the name game is very simple. You go to events, networking events, social events, bars, parties, things like that, wherever you like. It could be a park as well. And you give yourself the challenge to memorize as many names as possible. So for example, when I give a workshop to 50 high schoolers or 50 college students or 50 university teachers or professors or students, I try and memorize the number of names as possible, as much as possible. The more I get right, the better I am at listening. And it's also better the relationships that I end up building. I'll give you the best example. One of the previous workshops I gave was to a group of teenage students, right? Teenagers. And one of them name was Julia. It's not her actual name, but I'm just going to use a different name for the sake of this video. And Julia was someone who was very, very energetic, but everyone else in the room wasn't that energetic. They weren't very pumped. It was an 8 a.m. on a Saturday. But I didn't know her name, so when she started participating the first time, because she had so much energy, I asked her for her name. I was like, what's your name? And she said, Julia. So during the whole presentation, me and Julia sort of had this connection during the workshop. So I would use her a lot in my examples. Let's say Julia did this, or let's say Julia was at this company, or let's say Julia presented here. Let's say me and Julia were on this client team, etc. And through that relationship that I was building with her during the workshop, it got everyone else interested to say, hey, this is pretty cool. I kind of want to participate. I want to join in on this. So the name game doesn't just apply for just purely improving your listening skills, but it also applies in interactive workshops or different key areas of your life that you can use, right? Because people will remember you more if you remember their names, right? It's much better to see someone the second time and be like, hi, Brian, it's great to see you again. Or hi, Julie, it's great to see you again. Instead of just saying, hi, it's great to see you again. What was your name again? Right? So in that way, you're not just improving your listening skills, you're also improving your relationships with people and how you're mastering your audience. If there's anything that you take away from this week's episode, it's this. Mastering your listening is very important. It allows you to master your audience in a way you couldn't before, in a way that I couldn't, that I quickly realized I now can with the newly acquired ability that I've got from silences. But more specifically, silences because I speak less and I listen more. I'll also talk about my YouTube channel because I think that's important. When we think about MasterTalk in general, when I started the channel, I probably had like 10, 11, 12 video ideas about things I wanted to speak about. But because of the workshops that I was giving in person with a lot of my audience, or just online reviews or online comments that people have been giving me, I've been slowly gathering many, many more video ideas from people. But I never would have gotten those ideas if I wasn't listening to them. There's one workshop I gave a couple of weeks ago where there was this individual who just kept interrupting me every single slide. But it wasn't to faze me or to ruin my presentation, but rather to add something that I could potentially use for a future video. Hey, Brendan, you talked about this. Maybe you can also talk about this. I didn't see that in your videos yet. So these elements, these abilities, right? And more specifically, my ability to listen to this better that I wouldn't have had years ago now allows me to have more video context, more questions that you want answered, and more value to you guys as the audience. That's why master your audience, and you'll be one step closer to mastering your talk. I hope you enjoyed this week's video of Master Talk. If you did, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And I'll leave you off with this. If you know someone that isn't great at listening, that wants to get better, be sure to send them this video so that they'll be able to master their ability to listen carefully, but also master their audience and their talk. Take care, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.